What's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today I will be reviewing 2002's Spider-Man, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, James Franco, Willem Dafoe. There's been a range of live-action Spider-Man films, and they're all a little bit different from one another, so everybody has their own favorite variation. But over the years, I think people have come to a general consensus that Tobey Maguire was the best Peter Parker, but the worst Spider-Man. Andrew Garfield was the worst Parker, but the best Spider-Man. And Holland has been the best combination of the two, but there really is a lot to love with each variation, which of course I'll try to eventually get around to explaining. First, we're starting with the 2002 film. Do I still have your attention? If not, leave Slumberland and let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, Slumberland, an imaginary land described to children as the place they enter during sleep. Spider-Man stars Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker, just your average, everyday nerd fawning over the girl next door. When he's bitten by a radioactive spider, he soon learns that he gained the power of that spider, including super strength, organic webbing, and really sticky fingers that allow him to crawl up walls. Also entering the scene is the Green Goblin, a scientist that tested a human trial a little bit too soon. Peter must attempt to balance his life at home with his life as the titular superhero, Spider-Man. So, there's actually a couple of origin stories in this film, and because it came out in 2002, people weren't really tired of seeing them yet, so that's good. But you need to understand one main thing. This is primarily a coming-of-age tale over anything else, so there's not much of a narrative. Peter Parker's character isn't really trying to do anything other than figure himself out, and figure out, as Uncle Ben famously said, that with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, there's a villain, and yes, he'll eventually have to face the Green Goblin, but a majority of the movie, they don't really come face to face because the Green Goblin is really just busy getting even with those corporate guys in suits that don't like him or his work. He really only just dislikes Spider-Man when Spider-Man eventually gets in the way. No, this movie is primarily coming of age mixed with a wee bit of romance when it comes down to Mary Jane's character. That's actually the biggest thing that I have against the movie as a whole, because I don't really love coming of age films, but there's an endearing element to this movie that I just can't get over, and I think it's the characters and the casting. You can complain all you want that the actors are a little bit too old to play high schoolers, but they only play high schoolers for a fraction of the film. Personally, I love the casting in the movie. Tobey may not be the best Spider-Man ever, but his performance as this geeky Peter Parker guy is still my favorite version of Peter that I've ever seen. He is so good that whenever I see Tobey in anything else, I think, there's Spider-Man first. And you know what? The same can kind of be said for a majority of the cast. Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben, Rosemary Harris as Aunt May, Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, J.K. Simmons as frickin' J. Jonah Jameson. I mean, come on, the cast in this movie is insanely good, and they all made me care about what was happening in the film, and that's actually one of the biggest things about it. I cared very much about these characters and what was going on with them. Heck, even James Franco. I cared for his arc. Also, the soundtrack for this movie and the trilogy as a whole is still the very best score that any Spider-Man film has gotten. Ever. Danny Elfman is a frickin' god. If you disagree, you need to go back and watch this movie again and be reminded of that fact. I also really like the Spider-Man suit that we see in this trilogy. I consider it to be very iconic and grounded in reality. What I mean by that is the stunt work done by whoever was in the suit looked like a person who was actually performing stunts versus a character quickly transitioning into a CGI character to do inhuman stuff, which is what the later films often felt like, especially Tom Holland's suit, which often looked a little bit too smooth to look real. This was believable. Some visuals don't really work as much as they used to back in the day, primarily towards the beginning of the film when Peter goes on his little revenge rampage. You can see him kind of morph into a CGI character, and it's okay, especially for a movie that came out when it did, but there are indeed problems with visuals here and there. Same thing for when the Green Goblin's kind of flying around on his glider. Sometimes it looked like it was just pasted in there instead of him actually flying around New York City. So visuals could use an improvement, but in general, that's the main negative that I have to say. Where people would complain about dialogue or the acting, I'd actually disagree. It's memorable. I will forever know the speech at the beginning of this movie. Who am I? You sure you want to know? The story of my life is not for the faint of heart. Sure, some things that are said in the movie can be cheesy, but I think a majority of the cheesy lines are spoken in the other two movies. But some cheesy dialogue is found here too. But here's what I have to say about that. The original trilogy of Star Wars also had cheesy dialogue, but it's that suspension of disbelief when watching it that makes you kind of gloss over it. It's why when they had better dialogue and even better acting in the sequel trilogy, it didn't feel exactly like the original trilogy because you kind of come to expect that weird cheesy dialogue. And I feel like it's the same thing for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. I like the cheesy dialogue because Tobey's Peter Parker is a weird geek that is socially awkward, especially around MJ, but gains back confidence when she doesn't exactly know who he is. Personally, I think it makes a lot of sense. When it comes down to all the different variations of Spider-Man that we've ever gotten as a live-action character, I'd actually have to say that this was the only one I ever really connected with. And sure, that'll be different depending on who's actually watching, so it doesn't really factor so much into my score at all, but it does need to be stated because I feel like it's the case for a lot of different people, that this is one of those movies that people just hold near and dear to their heart. Take that as you will. I scored the original Spider-Man 92%, 92 out of 100 possible stars, granting it the letter grade of A-. Guys, I'm genuinely interested to hear what you have to say about this movie and who your favorite actor has been for either Peter Parker, Spider-Man, or both. Let me know down below. As for YouTube, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button if you like this review and would like to see other reviews just like it. Hit the little thumbs up button because that helps out my channel, and don't forget about the little bell icon because that helps notify you when I come out with my next review. And until then, peace out!